What's going on, everybody? This is Troger MC, and today I figured it would be kind of fun if I shared my experience getting into the horror genre. A genre that today I am very fond of. I'd say it's probably my favorite genre out there, but that hasn't always been the case. So let's take a step back, go back in time a little bit to when I was really young, and um, horror, I didn't really grow up with it all that much. I mainly grew up with action movies and things like Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and also some superhero movies like Sam Raimi's Spider Man and that kind of thing. So I mainly grew up around those, but there were two movies in particular that stood out from the rest, and I didn't think much of them in terms of like, oh my goodness, they're scary or anything like that. But looking back on it now, I would say that they are technically horror movies, and they are The Mummy from 1999 and its sequel, The Mummy Returns. So yeah, I grew up with both of these, and when I was younger, I actually preferred The Mummy Returns. I thought it was more interesting in the action, all of that, and also this was the movie that introduced me to Dwayne The Rock Johnson. But looking back on it now, I'd say that I do prefer the original movie, although I do still really like Mummy Returns. But basically, these movies were my introduction to horror, more or less. Um, so it was a thing of, like kind of exploring the more fantastical and like the dark side and all of that. So it was just fun, and I remember watching both of these, and I wasn't really scared by them. I was really just intrigued. I was like, that was really interesting. I want to check out more things like that. But I didn't really have those at first. So, like, I would say maybe like the first like 10 years of my life or so, it was just kind of, like I had these and then that was it. Okay. So, there you go. And like I said, I didn't get scared by these. I thought that they were fun. I thought that they were interesting. I thought they were funny, and they had a lot of action in them, and yeah, these movies do have some action in them. So, pretty cool. So basically, I grew up with these, and so this was kind of like my introduction. And then a little while later, in 2014, a little game came out by the name of Five Nights at Freddy's. Okay, I know this is the movie, but I just have it here as an example. But yeah, Five Nights at Freddy's came out, and huge hit. I mean, I'm sure if you're watching this video, you've heard of Five Nights at Freddy's. And how big of a hit it was and all of that. Well, for me, it was a really big hit for me, and it was really interesting to me. But there was another side to Five Nights at Freddy's that I don't know how many people have experienced this, but I actually used to have automatonophobia. Okay, and so I actually used to be afraid of animatronics and robots and that kind of thing. And so just the concept of like these uncanny animatronics like coming out to attack you, that genuinely scared me. And I kid you not, I actually used to have nightmares, and I actually used to like check around my room and all that. And I was older, okay? I was like 10 or 11, 12 years old, somewhere around there. And I was just terrified of these things. I was like, I don't want them to come after me and all of that. So like I was intrigued because I thought that the lore was really interesting. This is when Five Nights at Freddy's like just came out. So like you had the first four games, and then like that was about it. So it was like right when the series really started. And so there wasn't really a whole lot of answers, and there were people speculating, what happened and, who was responsible and all that. And we know a lot of those answers now, but back then we didn't. And so I was curious, and I was speculating of like what could be the story. But I was also terrified because I was like, I don't want these things to come after me. And yeah, so that was an important part for me, was the Five Nights at Freddy series, because it simultaneously got me intrigued to check out more that horror had to offer, and it made me terrified of like, I don't know if I want to continue exploring this because I'm genuinely scared here. But I did eventually get over that, and now I'm a really big Five Nights at Freddy's fan. So yeah, I'm not afraid of these things anymore. I actually think they're really cool. Um, but yeah, so there you go. This one is important to me. Then there were some other things that happened to me, and this was like a little while later. This was like I don't remember when this was. This was like a few years down the road, and I was in middle school, I think it was. And yeah, so I watched some movies in middle school, thanks to my parents' suggestions, because there were things of my parents would be like, oh yeah, I remember this movie. Have you seen that movie? And then they would like give me suggestions of, let's check out this movie. I can't believe you haven't seen it. Let's check it out. And there were some movies that they recommended to me that I was like, yeah, that's not really my thing. I mean, like, I get why it's popular, but it's not really my thing. It was mainly comedy movies. They were like, oh my goodness, these movies are so funny, and I watched them, and I was like, you think that's funny? I think that's dumb. But I digress. But there was one movie in particular that they did recommend to me. It was a thing of, oh, you might actually really like that movie, and that was John Carpenter's Christine. Yeah, so I saw Christine, and for me at the time, this like Five Nights at Freddy's, this was like the only thing I considered to be horror, at least that I liked. I mean, I was aware of horror franchises. Okay, I was aware of stuff like Friday the 13th and Halloween and all that. I was familiar with all those. I'd never seen any of those, and at the time, I had no interest in seeing any of them because like, I probably wouldn't like that. But yeah, so like this was the only horror thing that I liked. And then I saw Christine, and this is, fun fact, my favorite John Carpenter movie. And for a while, this actually used to be my all-time favorite horror movie. So yeah, Christine was really interesting to me, but I didn't really consider it to be a horror movie. It was a similar thing with the Mummy movies that I grew up with. It was a thing of, this is just a really cool movie, and I like it, and it's got an interesting story and an interesting object lesson. We can learn stuff from this movie. And so I thought it was really cool, and I saw it, and I was like, you know what? I kind of like that. And yeah, so with that, my parents were right. Because like I said, there were some movies that they recommended me that I didn't care for. This, however, I did like this one. I like this one a lot. So there you go, Christine. It's, like I said, this is my favorite John Carpenter movie. I know that there are a lot of people that immediately like clicked away from the video. They're like, oh, you didn't say Halloween is the best John Carpenter movie. I mean, it's probably his best, but this one's my favorite. So there you go. So Christine, important to me. But like I said, I wasn't scared by it. I was interested, and I really enjoyed it. I was like, that was just a really good movie. And then a little while later, I was shopping at Meijer with my mom. This was like a couple years after the fact. So this was when I was in high school. Okay, so I was like, I don't know, like my first or second year of high school, something like that. And we were at the movie section of Meijer. And for any of my non-Michigan viewers that don't have a clue what Meijer is, picture like Walmart. Okay, if y'all are familiar with Walmart, it's a lot like that, just smaller scale. But anyway, so we were at Meijer, and we were doing some shopping, and it was October. It was September or October, somewhere around there. So like near the Halloween season, kind of. And they had a display in the movie section for horror movies. And at the time, by this point, I didn't really think I would like horror. It was kind of a thing of like, yeah, I don't really know if that would be my thing or not. I mean, there are some horror movies that I like. And at the time, I was under the impression of Christine is like going to be at the top of my list, and like nothing is going to touch this because this is like my all-time favorite horror movie and all that. And so I was like, there's nothing that's going to dethrone this, but maybe I'd be interested in other horror movies. And there was one in particular that they had that stood out to me, and I was like, I've heard about that series. I've heard about that series, and I didn't really know too much about it and all of that. And so I was kind of curious of like, maybe I'll check it out. And y'all aren't going to like the movie that it was, because this movie is not really a popular one. But the movie that I saw that I was interested to check out was the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot. Yes, so out of all of the Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street movies, this was the first one that I saw. Yeah. I know that this one's not a popular one, but this was the one that started it all for me in terms of like, the big three, Freddy, Jason, and Michael. So I saw this, and I thought it was okay. I was like, it's pretty good, because this was the first one that I saw out of any of those series. Okay, so I saw this one, I was like, it's all right, it's okay. I mean, I could see myself rewatching it, but it's not a thing of like I'll watch it like all the time and all of that. But still, important to have this nonetheless. And yes, this is the original DVD that I got at Meijer all those years back. So yeah, this is important to me. Even though I haven't really rewatched this movie all that much. But regardless, so I saw this, and then it kind of got me thinking of, you know, maybe I would actually like some of the horror movies. Okay, and so I was kind of thinking about it, and I was like, this was so in high school was when I kind of had the idea of maybe I'll check them out, but I just never really had much of an incentive to do it. Okay, so I was just like, yeah, horror movies, they might be interesting, but you know, I don't know if it would really be my thing or not. So just kind of left it at that of like, maybe I'll check out some horror movies someday down the road. It doesn't really interest me all that much. So it just kind of stayed like that, and it stayed like that all throughout high school, and then it even stayed with me a little bit into college. But then, but then what happened was one day I decided I was like, I don't know what it was. I was just kind of in a horror mood. And I was just kind of thinking, I was like, there are some horror movies I've heard a lot of people really like. And I was like, let's just check it out. And I was like, well, I don't really know where to start because I haven't seen any of the Halloween movies. I haven't seen any of the Friday the 13th movies. I've only seen one Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and it wasn't one that a lot of people liked. And so it's like, I don't really know where to start, but then it got me thinking of, I have heard really good things about the Scream series. And I was like, haven't seen any of the Scream movies either, but I've heard really good things about them. So maybe I'll check out Scream. And what I did was I watched the original Scream, and I liked it so much. Okay, like that. That's an understatement, all right? My reaction watching the original Scream, and here's the thing, I knew, okay? I knew going into this movie, I knew who the killers were, okay? Because I heard everybody talking about it, of, Billy and Stu and all of that. And I'm like, I don't know who Billy and Stu are, but I guess they're the killers. So I saw this movie going into it knowing who the killers were. But I still got so much out of this movie. I was like, this is funny, but it's also got action in it. It's got some tense moments, but it's like not too intense and all of that. So it was a thing of like, oh my goodness, this movie is just so much fun and so interesting to me. And so I saw the original Scream, and I was like, that was an incredible movie. I don't really know what else to say, but I saw that and I was like, that's good. That's good. Let's go with that. So I saw that, and then I kid you not, it was later on that day, okay? I actually watched this like it was on a Sunday. I remember that. It was on a Sunday, and I watched it like very, very early in the morning, okay? We're talking about like 2 a.m. 2 a.m. I was like, I haven't seen Scream, and I actually found it on the Wayback Machine. I think they had like a free version of it, like a DVD recording of it or whatever. That's how I watched it, and so I thought it was really cool, and I was like, oh, check that out. So I saw that, and then later on that day, I watched Scream 2, Scream 3, and Scream 4. Okay? So I watched the first four Scream movies within 24 hours. Okay? And I got so much out of those because Scream 1, that was the only one where I knew who the killers were and I had an idea of what the plot was. 2 onward, I had no idea. So I was watching those completely fresh for the first time, and I was figuring out of like who's the killer and what's the motive and all of that. And I was just so invested with that. And when the reveals happened, I was like, oh wow, that was really cool and all of that. And yeah, for better or for worse, because some motivations and reveals were better than others. But I saw that and I was just invested. And then I saw it out. I was like, well, I have to see 5 and 6 because this was before 7 was announced. But I found 5 and 6 at a video store, and yes, we still have video stores today. They're rare, but they do exist. You just got to look for them. But I found Scream 5 and 6, and I watched those, and I thought they were so much fun. And so yeah, I watched all the Scream movies, and I was like, these are incredible. Okay, I didn't know how much I could like horror until I saw these. So I saw that, and then I decided okay, so I've seen Scream. I now know I like horror movies and all of that. But then I was like, okay, well, let's check out the big three, okay? Halloween, Friday the 13th, and the other Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Because remember, I'd seen the reboot, but I hadn't seen any of the other ones. And I decided what I'm going to do. I like knew a superficial amount of the other characters, and I was like, I think Jason Voorhees sounds the most interesting. So I decide, let's watch a Friday the 13th movie. I haven't seen any of those. And I heard some talk about, part two is the best. I heard people say final chapter is the best. And then I heard people say that Jason Lives is the best. And I was curious and I was like, let's check those out. And so I actually, based off of what I had heard, I wanted to check out the final chapter because I heard a lot of people say, final chapter is really good. You got to watch that one. I was like, okay, I'll watch final chapter, but I couldn't remember which part it was. Okay, I now know it's part 4, but at the time I didn't know that. I was like, okay, final chapter is which movie in the series? Is that the? It's not the first one. It's not the second one. I was like, which one is it? And I thought it was part 6. Okay, thought it was part 6, and I was like, well, okay, so I guess Friday the 13th, part 6. That's the final chapter. I guess I'll check that one out. And turns out, part 6 is not the final chapter. That's Jason Lives. But I did check out Jason Lives, nonetheless. And this one instantly became a favorite of mine. I was like, this is so much fun. And finding out that Kevin Williamson was inspired by Jason Lives when he wrote Scream, I was like, yeah, I can see it. And I understand why I like it. And this one came out 10 years before Scream did. So that was kind of cool. But this is my introduction to Jason and all of that. And I thought it was so much fun. And I thought it was interesting. And yes, this was the first one that I saw. I know some people might say, why did you watch part 6 first? You don't even know who Tommy Jarvis is and all that. I was able to catch on, all right? I was like, okay, Tommy Jarvis is some guy who's haunted by Jason, and he wants to make sure he's dead. Okay, I was able to understand that. I was able to follow that. And Final Chapter was actually one of the last Friday the 13th movies I ended up watching. I watched them for the first time. And I'm going to be honest, Final Chapter is not my thing. But Jason Lives is. And so that was kind of interesting to me of like, it was a thing of like realizing that I like movies that, like some people like and some people don't like, because there are a lot of people that like Jason Lives, don't get me wrong, okay? I'm one of them. This is my favorite Friday the 13th movie. But I know that there are a lot of people that also are really big fans of the final chapter. And for me, final chapter is actually one of my least favorites in the series. I don't know what it is, but it's just not one of my favorites. And so that was kind of my gateway into the thing of, well, people can have different opinions, but that can be fun, and we can agree and we can disagree, but it's okay. So, yeah, but that is, I would say, this is the collection of like the most important horror movies for me. So this was kind of my introduction to horror as we know it. And I know, again, this movie is not, the movie didn't come out yet when I was introduced to Five Nights at Freddy's. That was something that they've been working on for a very long time. But yeah, so here is my experience with horror movies. Y'all can see all of those. But yeah, so I thought that that would be kind of fun to explore and all of that. There you go. That can kind of give you a better idea of all of them. But yeah, so that was just kind of my introduction to horror. And so I'm curious of, what was your introduction to horror? What was the first horror movie you saw? And what made you think of, I want to check these out? Or, maybe it was the thing if you saw a horror movie and you're like, I don't like this. And then maybe you revisit it later. I don't know. But I'm curious. So that was my experience. I'm curious to know what yours is. And so y'all can let me know in the comments. I guess if you like this kind of video, you can leave a like. If y'all want to do that, you can subscribe. Stay tuned. You can check out my NECA horror action figure reviews. I think those are kind of fun. And you can stay tuned for other videos like this, because I do plan to make other videos kind of similar to this, just exploring different topics. But other than all that, I do hope that you enjoyed. I do hope that I'll see you all later. Boo.